Have you ever walked into a room and felt the energy change? Not because you said anything, not because you demanded attention, but because people suddenly became quieter, more careful, more distant. At first, you might think people dislike you, that you're doing something wrong, that you're somehow difficult to approach. But what if the truth is completely different? What if some people aren't avoiding you because they dislike you? What if they're avoiding you because you intimidate them? And the strange thing about intimidation is that it doesn't always come from aggression. Sometimes it comes from confidence, self-respect, intelligence, authenticity. And most people never realize they're intimidating others until they understand the psychology behind it. When people hear the word intimidating, they usually imagine someone loud, dominant, aggressive, powerful. But in reality, some of the most intimidating people are actually quiet, calm, observant, emotionally controlled. Because true intimidation isn't always about physical presence. It's about psychological presence. Some people make others uncomfortable simply because they expose insecurity without trying. Their confidence reminds others of their self-doubt. Their discipline reminds others of their excuses. Their authenticity reminds others of the masks they're wearing. And without saying a word, they create psychological pressure. That's why intimidation is often misunderstood. People assume it's about power, but many times it's about reflection.
Here are 7 signs you may intimidate people more than you realize.
Sign 1. People become defensive around you. You ask a simple question, and suddenly people start explaining themselves, defending their decisions, justifying their actions. You didn't accuse them, but your presence alone makes them feel evaluated. That's often a sign of intimidation. Sign 2. People copy you. Human beings naturally imitate people they admire. Your phrases, your behavior, your habits, even your opinions. And while it may seem harmless, it's often a subconscious sign of influence.
Sign 3. People rarely give you honest criticism. You notice something strange. People compliment you, agree with you, support you, but rarely challenge you directly. Not because you're always right, because some people fear your reaction more than they admit. Sign 4. People watch you quietly. When you're not paying attention, they're observing, watching how you speak, how you behave, how you handle pressure. Strong psychological presence naturally attracts observation. Sign 5. Your boundaries make people uncomfortable. You say no, without guilt, without over-explaining, without apologizing. And suddenly, people seem irritated. Not because your boundary is wrong, because they're not used to people enforcing one. Sign 6. People misinterpret your confidence. Confident people are often labeled arrogant, cold, intimidating, unapproachable, especially by insecure individuals. Confidence often triggers projection. Sign 7. Some people secretly dislike you without knowing why. This one surprises people. Sometimes your existence reminds others of what they're avoiding, their potential, their fears, their insecurities. And instead of addressing those emotions, they redirect them toward you. Here's where dark psychology enters the picture. Insecure people often experience something called ego threat. When someone displays confidence, competence, or authenticity, it unconsciously threatens fragile self-esteem, and the brain immediately seeks relief. Sometimes through criticism, sometimes through gossip, sometimes through exclusion. Not because you've harmed them, because your presence forces comparison. and comparison can be psychologically painful. The strongest people in a room often become targets for this reason, not because they're weak, because they're visible. Emotionally intelligent people eventually realize something important. Not everyone who feels uncomfortable around you is your enemy. Some people are simply confronting emotions they don't understand. Jealousy, insecurity, admiration, self-doubt. These emotions often look similar from the outside. That's why emotionally mature people don't obsess over being liked. They focus on being authentic. Because trying to make everyone comfortable usually means abandoning parts of yourself. And authenticity always comes with a price. Human beings constantly compare themselves to others, consciously and unconsciously. It's part of social psychology. We compare success, confidence, attractiveness, status, intelligence, discipline. And when someone consistently scores higher in areas we value, our brain reacts emotionally. Sometimes with inspiration, sometimes with resentment. The difference depends on emotional maturity. Secure people feel motivated. Insecure people feel threatened. And that's why the exact same person can be admired by one group and disliked by another. But here's the twist most people never expect. You may not actually be intimidating. You may simply be unwilling to shrink yourself. Many people spend years making themselves smaller, less confident, less honest, less successful, less visible, just to avoid making others uncomfortable. And the moment someone refuses to do that, they get labeled intimidating. Not because they're dangerous, because they're unapologetic. And that difference changes everything. If people seem uncomfortable around you, don't immediately assume you've done something wrong. Sometimes confidence feels threatening to insecurity. Sometimes authenticity feels threatening to performance. Sometimes self-respect feels threatening to people who have none. Your job is not to make everyone comfortable. Your job is to remain genuine. Because the people who are meant to connect with you won't be intimidated by your growth. They'll be inspired by it. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is this. The people who are intimidated by you are often seeing a version of themselves they wish they had the courage to become. And that's not your burden to carry. It's theirs.